Welcome back. A local organization called Direct Relief inspired our own friend Kevin Davis to take a trip to New Orleans. And Kevin is a freelance journalist and decided to share what he found with us. You were just decided to spend your savings and head out there, is that right?
Yeah, basically, I mean, we all remember back when Katrina happened, you would see the media just all the time, Katrina, Katrina. And then now you don't really hear anything about it. And so I was just wondering myself, living in California, what's going on over there? And are people, are they fully recovered? Are they still going through, things? And so I went with my friend Nick Namikas, who did all the camera work for this, and we just decided to go see and listen to what people had to say.
And you're going to share this story. Well, take a look.
Very little, but not enough. Will the golf course be overlooked, or will you guys send help? Thanks.
2 years, $114 billion, 1 million volunteers, and 14 million man-hours spent rebuilding Katrina-afflicted areas. But for those of us in Santa Barbara, we only hear about the Gulf Coast and its residents on anniversaries of one of the nation's most devastating natural disasters. So where are they now, and what is life like on the Gulf Coast 2 years later? New Orleans, life in the French Quarter is pretty much back to normal. Street musicians entertain those passing by, some hoping for a buck and some hoping to draw a smile. Bourbon Street still draws massive crowds with this diverse nightlife. The Superdome, which had its roof partially ripped off during the storm, has been restored to its former glory. But drive a few minutes past the main street and one sees a very different story. Nearly a third of the population of New Orleans has yet to return. And in one of the most devastated areas, emptiness and decay can best describe what has become a literal ghost town. Here in the 9th Ward, you can see abandoned houses like the one behind me pretty much everywhere. You can also see the markings left by rescue workers as they came to clear out the house, even though it's been 2 years since the storm hit. On the top, you have the date it was cleared, September 17th. On the left, the name of the group that cleared it out, in this case, a group from California. And on the bottom, you have the amount of bodies that were found. Now, this says 0, but we've seen as many as 8 bodies in one house, and that's just down the street. These people also left a message blaming the government for a lack of funding, which is probably why they had to take off. And if you look inside, you can see that what used to be somebody's home has been completely destroyed. But the slow recovery isn't limited to the 9th Ward alone. In another part of New Orleans, Lisa Palumbo's rebuilding effort has stalled while she fights just to collect her insurance.
It took us 17 months just to settle with the insurance company over the foundation issue.
For Lisa, recovery is anything but easy. Her insurance company claimed that because her house was also damaged by water, they didn't have to pay.
Insurance companies like to attribute a lot of things that have to do with foundation damage to flood because flood takes it off of them. And unfortunately, National Flood Insurance does not cover damage to a foundation.
But the contractor Lisa hired had a different opinion.
He came and looked at the house, and he looked at the structural damage, and he said this was absolutely caused by wind. You can see in the picture that I lined everything up and made grid lines at 90 degrees, and you can see that the horizontal lines line up with my fence, which is level in the front. And if you look at you can see how the house is definitely tilted from a vertical line.
In the meantime, Lisa comes every day to her broken home, picking one thing to fix until she has the money to start over. Like many in New Orleans, her story of recovery is one of frustration and patience tested. But New Orleans isn't the whole story. An hour's drive east is Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, which was ground zero for Katrina's wrath. While the hurricane broke the levees and flooded New Orleans, in Bay St. Louis, the 135-mile-an-hour winds completely wiped homes off the map. Even 2 years later, a neighborhood that once had majestic homes is now scattered with rubble and FEMA trailers. For Kathleen Koch of CNN, who was raised in Bay St. Louis and lost the home she grew up in, the tragedy hits close to home.
You're there and you know you've got to do your job, and that is the best way at the time that you can help people. But at the same time, you want to rip off that microphone, and you want to commandeer your SUV where you've got a little bit of food and water for you and your crew and your producer, and you just want to start driving up and down the streets.
In this town ravaged by Katrina, Kathleen's story of personal loss is just one of many.
I'll never complain about making the bed again, because you can't even get around that. You got to crawl on it to make the bed, and my wife insists we make the bed every day. If it wasn't for my wife, it would.
Where a beautiful house once stood, 2 FEMA trailers occupy Joe D's land. Like many others in his neighborhood, a sign sits out front that lets people know his true feelings about his insurance company.
Everybody, it started to be like, instead of Christmas Card Alley at Christmas time, it started to be State Farm Sorry, Allie.
Joe has been waiting 2 years for State Farm to pay him. Like Lisa from New Orleans, his insurance company denied his claim because water was also involved. He hopes he can rebuild his home soon.
All we want is what we paid for so we can build our house back and get on with our lives.